right. Thank you for coming to our January Threads webinar hosted by Better Together. I'm Jessica Maddox, the Associate Director of the Better Together project. Whether you're a regular webinar attender or you're joining us for the first time, we're really glad that you're here. Through webinars, training workshops, and in-person gatherings, Better Together works to support the kind of connection and community that helps congregations build unity across difference for the sake of the church's mission and witness in the world. Tonight is our fourth webinar in the Thread series, and we are joined by the Reverend Dr. Richelle White for the topic Ubuntu and the Image of God, choosing to see each other as we are. Dr. White is a professor of youth ministry at Kuiper College in Grand Rapids, and her commitment to helping people, especially young people, connect with themselves through reflection, with one another through conversation, and with God through the scriptures is evidenced throughout her work in the classroom, the church, and beyond as a teacher, preacher, writer, mentor, consultant, and life coach. And folks, she's also my friend. We're so glad that she's here. Finally, a quick word about our time together tonight. You will be invited at a few points to engage with the material Dr. White has prepared, and we hope that you do. You are warmly encouraged to enrich the wisdom of this evening by sharing your questions and observations along the way, especially in response to some of the engagement prompts that Dr. White has prepared. With all that said, folks, let's get started. Dr. White, thank you for joining us tonight. We're glad that you're here. Take it away, my friend.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Just a little bit about myself. One thing I should have told Jessica to say that I didn't say is that I am a child of God, as are you. So I'm just glad that we're all here together, sharing the mission of Better Together. Our session tonight is called Ubuntu and the Image of God, choosing to see each other as we are. And as you have heard, Ubuntu is a South African philosophy that delineates how to live well together. It's not a biblical concept, but it emphasizes that everything we learn and experience is through our relationships with other people. And so Ubuntu mirrors the image of God by choosing to see each other as we are. So that's just a highlight of what we will be experiencing tonight. That's our framework. But I would like to share a biblical passage that will frame our time together that helps us to see the Ubuntu process of I am because we are. And I'm reading from Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 through 14. And it reads, "Don't forget that you Gentiles used to be outsiders. You were called uncircumcised heathens by the Jews, who were proud of their circumcision, even though it affected only their bodies and not their hearts. In those days, you were living apart from Christ. You were excluded from citizenship among the people of Israel, and you did not know the covenant promises God had made to them. You lived in this world without God and without hope. But now you have been united with Christ. Once you were far away from God, but now you have been brought near to him through the blood of Christ. For Christ himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people when in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separates us. And I think now Jesus calls us to see each other as we are. So we're going to encourage participation and engagement. So if you have maybe a piece of paper that you want to write on and something to write with, a pen or a pencil, we also will be actively using the chat. So we ask that you get your fingers ready to type. We're going to participate first in a self-awareness activity. And what we're going to do is take a look at some pictures and use the chat feature to share your reaction to who or what you see. This is just to prime the pump to get us thinking about choosing to see each other as we are. Jessica? Don't forget to use the chat. Thank you for responding by writing your first thoughts, associations, feelings, ideas, and questions or memories that surface. If you still want to type in some things in the chat, please feel free to do so as we take a few moments to debrief the activity. So the first two questions Jessica is going to help us with as she reads the responses in the chat. What were your reactions to the photos that you saw, and what were your thoughts, feelings, and or memories?
So some responses are brilliant, leaders, inspiring, brave, famous and infamous, power are some keywords that came up.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing. So, were there any surprises? Feel free to write these two response for the next two questions. Write your responses in the chat as well. What were some surprises that you encountered as you saw the pictures? And were there any pictures or images that challenged you? Feel free to respond to those two questions in the chat. Any surprises and any images that were challenging when you saw them?
Hitler was challenging. That's one of the comments.
Any surprises, any other challenges?
Surprised to see Hitler and Kirk in the list. Another surprised by Charlie Kirk.
And we threw some pictures in there for a reaction. So that was intentional because we didn't want everyone to be seen as a saint, so to speak. So we threw some of those challenges and surprises in there. So that brings us to the next question. What informs our reactions to what we see? What informs our reactions to what we see? So one question I could ask to follow up with that is, what makes seeing Hitler or Charlie Kirk a challenge? What informs that idea that they are a challenge or surprising?
And we've got a couple of responses here. Our learnings and readings, personal experience, people who I see as historical figures versus modern figures. Our worldview and what our beliefs are.
Mm-hmm. Were there images that called you to question their image of God?
Someone wrote Hitler.
Any others that challenge us to see God's image?
Can I pipe in, Dr. White?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
I love this question because I think it makes me think about this tension in myself between the answer I know that I am supposed to give, right? I believe that everybody bears the image of God, but the idea of having more visceral reactions to people, um, yeah, that does make me, it challenges how far down that belief sinks into my heart if my knee-jerk reaction is other than to affirm that initially. We've got some other responses here too. Their message and how it clashes with mine.
Hmm.
And we got another. Could you repeat the question again, Dr. White, so we can just frame these comments as they're coming in?
Yes, just give me a second. Were there image, were there images that called you to question their image of God?
Yeah. So more comments. I would agree with the Kirk pick. Had a gut reaction negative to that one. I guess Robin Williams. I went to Mork and Mindy. I'm old. Deep respect for the image of RBG. I'm a slow typer. Sorry. Hey, that's okay. I'm with you. Oh, and a little agreement with what I shared before about that little disconnect there.
Thanks everyone for sharing. Any other comments that you'd like to type in the chat um, before I share a couple quotes from two significant figures who subscribe to the Ubuntu philosophy?
If it's okay, I'll just throw out one more thing
Mm-hmm.
that struck me in this exercise is also what informs me. Someone mentioned, what informs their ideas about people. It made me think about all the, time you spend in the news or learning history or having conversations with people, even social media. And it made me realize there's probably a heavier time in my day spent doing that sort of thing, being fed ideas about people through those sources than having reminders of the image of God through other sources. That's not
Mm-hmm.
usually how we talk about people, not how what
Right.
are reminded about folks. So made me wonder if maybe I need to have a few other sources speaking into my day.
Right. And that's a good concept with self-awareness, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Um, how we become self-aware, and then we can control what we do or what we say or what we expose ourselves to.
Yeah,
So a part of this seeing ourselves in others or seeing others as they are is key in self-awareness.
yeah. Nice. Look at that little segue we did there.
So I have some quotes I'd like to share. One is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who was very integral in the healing and reconciliation movement in South Africa at the end of apartheid and even during apartheid. And he says, I believe each one of us is a saint until the contrary is proven. And then Nelson Mandela, the first Black president of South Africa, who had been jailed for 27 years prior to the presidency, says people are human beings produced by the society in which they live. You encourage people by seeing the good in them. So those two quotes basically help us to believe in the good of everyone. And we believe everyone is good until it's proven otherwise, as with some of the images that we saw. And then we encourage people by seeing the good in them. So you can just think of someone that you may not be very fond of, but how could you go a long way in encouraging them by finding something good in them simply because they're created in God's image? So we're going to share a story. I like to share a story with you. One of my favorite things to do is to write stories and tell stories and facilitate storytelling sessions. And going to read the story, and you can take a look at the question or the comment before we get into small groups. We're going to ask you to get into you'll be put in a small group following the story to discuss the question, which will also be dropped in the chat for you to consider. So here's the story. In a bustling city neighborhood, defined by diverse faiths, a gentle elderly woman named Elena lived next door to a young man, Tariq. They were cordial neighbors, often exchanging waves, but their interactions were limited, each bound by their own community and customs. Elena was a devout Christian who attended St. Jude's Church every Sunday, while Tariq was a practicing Muslim who prayed at the local mosque. Their worlds, though physically close, felt miles apart due to the invisible lines drawn by the differences in faith. One sweltering summer afternoon, as a sudden storm raged, a large tree branch snapped and blocked their shared driveway. Tariq, coming home from work, immediately began the arduous task of clearing the heavy debris. Seeing his struggle, Elena, despite her age, grabbed a small handsaw and joined him. Many hands make light work, she smiled, handing him a pair of sturdy gloves. They worked together in the pouring rain, soaked and muddy, their theological differences forgotten in the shared purpose of clearing the path. They talked about their families, their jobs, their hopes for their neighborhood. The physical labor broke down the initial awkwardness, revealing the shared humanity beneath their different religious attire. As the sun emerged, they finally rolled the last heavy log aside, tired but accomplished. Thank you, Elena. I couldn't done this alone, Tariq said, wiping mud from his face. Of course, Tariq, she plied warmly. It's easy to see the good in someone when you're working side by side, isn't it? From that day on, a true friendship bloomed. They would often share coffee in the morning, swapping stories and recipes, each learning a little bit more about the other's faith, not through debate, but through shared experiences and mutual respect. Their shared driveway, once a mere boundary, became a symbol of their connection, a testament that while our paths to the divine may differ, our capacity for kindness and shared purpose is universal. Their neighborhood, in turn, became a slightly brighter place, illuminated by the quiet understanding between two people who chose to see the good in each other across any perceived divide. So, in your small groups, I would like for you to consider this prompt. Consider someone whose perspective, worldview, or philosophy of life might be different than yours. Or think of someone you know but dislike. What examples from Tariq and Elena's story could help you to see their inherent good despite your differences?
Okay, folks, we're going to be put into a group for about 7 minutes for conversation, and you're going to be invited to share just a quick introduction of yourself and then consider this prompt. And I will drop that in the chat in just a moment. And we want to hear what you have to say.
I said, did we want to hear a couple of responses of what was said in the groups?
That sounds great. Yeah, so you had a chance to have a conversation with a few folks in a group and maybe throw in the chat something that somebody said that you think would be useful for all of us to hear. What little aha moment or bit of wisdom or even a little spot of joy.
I won't use the chat, but I will share.
Let's hear
Something I thought brought a moment of joy from our group. Um, we said that Elena and Tariq had a tangible problem. The driveway needed to be cleaned up. And that on the surface was not a very deep thing. But through their cleaning up, they got to engage on a deeper level. And then I also added, it reminds me of Better Together because the mission was to get the driveway cleaned up. So
it.
they overcame their differences for the sake of mission.
Hmm.
So that was a spot of joy I wanted to share from our group.
I love that. Thank you. We got someone who shared something in the chat too, starting with something small like twigs, and that leads to getting to something deeper. Yeah, that's so true. One of the things, kind of piggybacking off of that, Dr. White, something that struck me about this is it's there's a kind of require a unity that can come out of requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the inverse of that is that when there isn't requirement and urgency around that, it's easier to just stay separate. But
Right.
there's something valuable about a kind of, like you say, something that needs to get done. That's great. Anybody else want to throw another, just a little nugget of something in your conversation that you thought this would be good for everybody to hear? Okay, Dr. White, I think it's to you.
Okay. Well, just want to slow down, reflect, and consider some things that may prompt us in practical ways to see the good in others, as well as seeing each other as we are, and engage in ways that might be helpful that look like things we can do. It's not that something that's not doable, but these things that we're going to share from slow down, reflect, and consider are things we can do. One thing I love to do is ask significant questions. It is one of my all-time favorite things to do as a teacher, is to ask questions. And even if you're not a teacher, just asking questions and using that intellectual virtue of curiosity, to find out, to broaden your world, to expand yourself, to expand your cross-cultural awareness by asking questions. And then you can consider shared experiences. Janet in our group was talking about the large amount of snow that they get in Barre, Michigan, and that's everyone's outside shoveling. And through that shared experience of shoveling, they get to know each other better as neighbors. So considering shared experiences, and then finding common bonds. What do you have in common with other people? And then also engage in storytelling. All of us have stories, multiple stories, many stories. And stories draw us into one another because in the story sharing, we're able to connect with that bond of being human. And then choose to see the positive in others. Even if the negative outweighs it, make the intentional choice to see something positive because that person is created in God's image. And along with saying that they are created in God's image, choose to see their humanity. We all bear the inherent value and worth that God places upon us when He creates us. And then embody mutual respect. In our group, we also talked about sometimes you just have to agree to disagree. We don't have to vilify others, but we can embody mutual respect. And then confront negativity bias. All of us have bias. All of us have bias. And self-awareness comes when we confront that bias and do something about it. And then focus on strengths and talents. How many of us see people that, or know people that we don't like, but we see a strength in them? Focus on that strength and see the good in them. And then the number 10, smile. It goes a long way. One of my favorite things to do in the grocery store is to smile at people. Now, most people probably think I'm really weird when I do it, but I just want to see how many people will smile back. I'm trying to get a reaction. So smile. It doesn't hurt anything. Any comments from the chat? Oh,
Can I?
yeah. Yes,
Oh,
go ahead, Jessica.
no, I was gonna say, can I pipe up about this? Because I love this list and I love that you give us these hooks that are so achievable. Um, but I'm going to throw this out there. What if I just don't want to? What if I don't want to do any of these things, Dr. Richelle? What if I am not feeling curious anymore, or I think I already know everything about a person, or I don't want to hear any more about their shared experiences, or I don't want to hear their stories because they make me angry. What do we do when we don't want to consider a person beyond the scope of our judgments of them?
You have a choice. I'm going to make it that simple. You have a choice. You choose to live your own life experience. If you choose not to ask questions, if you choose not to share experiences, if you choose not to tell stories, if you the bottom line is growth. This list is a list of items that can help you grow. So
Yeah,
if you choose not to grow, like I said, that's your choice. I'm not going to beat you over the head. That's your choice. It's your life.
yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
And I'm looking at Nate has a comment here. Thank you, Nate. So I'm going to try to practice this. You called curiosity an intellectual virtue. Can you unpack that a bit? I don't often know that I've ever thought of curiosity as a virtue. There's a book we read when as a faculty member at Kuiper College called Intellectual Virtues. And so one of the intellectual virtues was curiosity. And what curiosity does, it continues to enhance your learning because with the learning, being curious helps you to continue on this trajectory of growth. So when we stop asking questions, when we stop asking questions, when we stop being curious, then we stop growing because we're not looking at it from a perspective where I can learn from this situation and it impact my intellectual life. Or I could just shut down, like Jessica kind of said with the list. Some people just shut down and don't want to do it. So the intellectual virtue of curiosity is promoting your intellect. It's helping your intellect to grow by being curious and questioning and inquiring and things like that. So I hope that helped a little bit.
That's so good, Dr. Shell. If I could piggyback on that too, I think about the right being curious. There's a kind of humility to it.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about, that list and saying, well, sometimes I just don't want to do that. There is a kind of arrogance to that. Right? I don't need to change. I don't need to grow. There's nothing about anybody else I need to know more of. I know enough to make a decision. And yeah, that curiosity you're encouraging us in. Oh, I love this. Someone has shared, be curious, not judgmental. Ted Lasso. Gotta love Ted Lasso. And this list reminds me, someone writes, that I need to be more like a child who questions.
Hmm. Even though sometimes children's questions can get the best of you,
Woo,
they leave you speechless.
that's so true.
But they're so much fun,
Yeah.
right?
And it's so helpful to remember. I think sometimes we can make it be so complicated. And yeah, and I love your straightforward comment too. Just it's a choice
It's a
and
choice.
just make the right one. Yeah, framing in terms of growth versus yeah, not growing in that direction. That's
Mhm.
good. That's great.
So we're going to enter into a second story. The first story was about, say personal mission, personal engagement. This one is more so mission oriented. So I'm going to read a story and help ask you to reflect on the following questions. And you will again will be put into small groups following the story. And these questions will be dropped in the chat, so you can feel free to focus on the story as I'm reading, not necessarily the questions, so we can be centered together. The historic stained glass window of St. Jude's Episcopal Church had seen over a century of weddings and Sunday sermons, but they had never borne witness to a debate quite like this. The issue wasn't the color of the new carpeting, but a deep theological divide over the church's position on a contemporary social issue, a schism that mirrored debates within the larger national denomination itself. On one side stood Reverend Thomas, a man who preached traditional interpretations of Scripture and believed the church must hold fast to its historic doctrines. His sermons spoke of unwavering faith and the importance of adhering to the principles that had guided generations. On the other side was a vocal, passionate group of younger families and some longtime members who advocated for a more inclusive and evolving interpretation of the faith, arguing the church needed to adapt to remain relevant in a changing world. The tension simmered for months, turning the usually peaceful vestry meetings into arenas of polite but firm disagreement. The air became thick with unspoken words and hurt feelings. Potluck dinners, once joyfully community gatherings, were now segregated by ideology. The inevitable came during a special congregational meeting, a formal vote on the church's affiliation with the national body and its new contentious policies. The vote was close, but the traditionalist view narrowly prevailed. The next Sunday, the pews on the left side of the aisle, once filled with progressive faction, were empty. The split was not just a separation of ideology, it was a tearing of the community's fabric. Longtime friends no longer shared coffee hour conversation. The talented choir director and half the choir left. The once vibrant youth group dwindled to a handful of teenagers. Reverend Thomas continued to deliver his sermons to a smaller, quieter, but ultimately unified congregation on his side of the issue. The departing members, led by a charismatic lay leader, began meeting in the local community center, calling themselves Community of Hope. They focused on service projects and open dialogue, building a new, different kind of community. Years passed. St. Jude's regained its equilibrium, with new families joining its ranks, though the memory of the Spirit remained part of its history. The Community of Hope thrived, eventually saving enough money to purchase its own building across town. The two congregations, once one, learned to coexist in the same small city, each fulfilling a different spiritual need. The effects of the division, a lasting testament to the complex nature of faith and community.
Okay, folks, once again, you'll be put in a group for about 7 minutes, and we'll come back and share some, just like last time, some responses that you want to share with the larger group. Okay, Dr. White.
Did we want to hear some responses in the chat, just some general comments about this story?
Great.
We have a couple minutes.
Oh, we do have a comment here. Root cause of division is not acknowledging that you might be wrong.
Another one we talked about was also being absolutely right, convinced that you are right and no one else is.
Yeah, right. Well, that gets back to your what you said before about curiosity. And I think part of our hard work, for all of us, right, is that holding that humility of curiosity, even as you hold deep conviction about something. Um, can we be curiously convicted?
Mm-hmm.
Convicted
Mm-hmm.
with curiosity, that is you talked about growth. That feels like a growing edge.
Mm-hmm.
We have another comment here. I think it's always key to see how complex these relationships are. Yeah. And there's humility in that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like you said, we always have a choice, and when I put myself a little bit higher than I think I should be, I have to always look at myself and say, Lord, have mercy on me, you know, and look at it from that perspective that I'm a sinner too.
Yeah.
My sin just may not look like someone else's sin, but Lord, have mercy on me. That's one of my prayers when I'm
Yeah.
not when I'm thinking of myself more highly than I ought, and
Yeah.
the complexity of relationships when people don't see what you see.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Dr. Wright, one of the things I was just going to comment too that struck me about your questions about that story, right? Because that's a tough story. It's a tough story that's happening to churches all over the place and has happened to, in the Christian Reformed Church, and it's just a painful, hard, confusing thing to navigate sometimes. And but I appreciate that you gave us an opportunity to think about it in a different context. Um, but the way you framed that story, there was there was work to do. And you talked about coexisting, and you also talked about time. And it did make me think that the story of, yeah, when I think about Better Together, and the story of unity, it does take time.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah, it's not always like the Elena and Tariq story, but it doesn't mean that it can't still have good. Dr. White, any last closing wisdom you'd like to share with us? We're off at
Just if you put the last slide up, just elaborate a little. I
oh,
will elaborate a little on that
yeah.
slide.
Thanks for that nudge.
So, seeking out the good in others often starts by finding a simple connection with their humanity. And then, when you choose to see the good in others, you end up finding the good in yourself. And the spirit of Ubuntu is at work when we reach out and find common bonds to heal divisions and build new connections. And as I would like to just wrap up, I have been a youth ministry professor for almost 20 years. And so I'm constantly in churches and parachurch organizations with young people who are quote unquote polished. And so I can say I've been to at least 100 youth groups over the years where I tend to see the same thing, which is we have a game, we have a lesson, we have small groups, and we have snacks. Now I'm not criticizing this method of youth ministry. That's just my observation. But in the past year, I have become disconnected with traditional youth ministry
Hmm.
because it's traditional. And are we really reaching kids that need to be reached? And so I set out on a mission, and now I go to the juvenile detention center when they have breaks from school. So I go during spring break, I go during winter break, and I go during their summer break. And so in the juvenile detention center, they're from ages 11 to 18. And yes, there are some 11-year-olds in juvenile detention. There are some 18-year-olds who are repeat offenders. They've been there 4 or 5 times. They smoke weed, they steal cars, they beat up their family members. They do a series of things that we would not consider normal. But they too are created in the image of God. And so God was challenging me to not necessarily abandon church youth ministry, but to step out and move into the next area that He's calling me to. So, what I'm challenged by when want to see the good in others, I'm challenged by Matthew 25 and 35 that says, "For when I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me." So this is how I'm being challenged in this season when I look at Ubuntu. And one thing I'd like to end with is what Jesus says to his disciples: "If you love me, obey my commands." So that's the charge to all of us. Whatever sphere or part of the world we find ourselves in, obey and keep God's commands. Not just read them, not just memorize them, but keep them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. White. That's excellent. If I can just wrap up with a couple closing comments. First of all, Dr. White, thank you. We appreciate your wisdom and your perspective and your clear and concise charge to decide and to take action and to be obedient to what Jesus is calling us to. Folks, we love sharing these webinars with you. We've got another one coming up next month, and you'll get an email about that, and it's also on our website. Our next one is February 17 at 7:30, and we're going to have the Reverend Dr. Laura Osborne on the topic, Building Bridges in a Broken World, from university campuses to ecumenical conferences. And hope you can join us for that too. Again, Dr. White, thank you for your time and your presence. We appreciate you. If I can just close our time together with a blessing. Sisters and brothers, fellow image bearers of God, may we be more and more like Christ every day, growing in humility and gentleness and patience. And just as God has shown his love to us, may the Spirit help us to love one another. Bless you all, and good night.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for being here.